Welcome to Udacity Talks number 11. I have this incredible pleasure to have, I guess, the founding father of cloud computing here in Silicon Valley with me, a legend and a pioneer in data science over many, many decades, Amr Awadallah from Egypt.
Thank you.
Amr is CTO of Cloudera, one of the earliest partners of Udacity, also founder of Cloudera. Has a history of selling data science companies to places like Yahoo, which used to be a company, I guess, and it's not slowly disintegrating at this point, but independent of the sale. Yeah. But also born and raised in Egypt, I take it.
That's correct.
So when did you come over?
I came in 1995.
How old were you, if I may ask?
Yeah, of course you can ask. I was 25 years old. I'm 46 right now.
I see.
So I was 25 back then, and I came with the goal to get my PhD from Stanford University. And then go back to Egypt and teach. I love to teach.
Your father is a professor, right?
Yes, my father is a teacher, professor.
What does he teach?
He teaches economics at Cairo University.
Where in Egypt?
In Cairo University, yes. Yeah. So he's in the faculty of commerce, essentially.
And then you kind of got stuck here? You got your PhD, I take it?
I did finish my PhD. I mean, there's a long story around that. I actually dropped out of my PhD first. I created my first company, my first startup, which Yahoo acquired. A year later, it was a very small company, 5 people. We were acquired, a small acquisition, so an acqui-hire kind of acquisition. And then while at Yahoo, I got the itch to finish my PhD, partially because I really wanted to accomplish that goal, but more importantly because my dad was nagging me to go back and finish the PhD.
So, parental power.
Yeah, yes. So a few years into my stint at Yahoo, I told them I want to go back and leave Yahoo, and they said, no, you're not going to leave us. They were very nice to me. They gave me the time to work on my PhD. They also helped with my tuition.
That's very nice.
So I was able to go back and finish the PhD while I was working at Yahoo.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And then your plan was to become a professor yourself.
Yeah, that was always my goal since I was a very young kid.
Is it still your goal?
Not anymore, no. I frequently joke and say I got corrupted by the Silicon Valley. In the sense of forget about this teaching thing, let's start companies instead. So no, right now I'm really enjoying the entrepreneurship thing.
That's great, that's great. And of course, I mean, this has been an eventful year for you. Cloudera went public, congratulations. Yes. It's a major step.
A major milestone, yeah.
You built.
I look forward to you guys doing the same thing soon.
Oh,
I can tell you.
Careful with any announcements here today.
I'm not saying when, but...
Tell me, from a founder's, you're not the CEO obviously, but from the founder's perspective, is going public, is this like a great step forward, or is it like scary and turning people more risk averse?
No, it's a great step forward. If you have a good team in place, it's a great step forward. So the analogy really, like after actually going through the IPO and doing it, the analogy was very similar to graduating from Stanford. Graduation in general. So when you graduate, you're both scared because now you're going to be entering the real world, but you're also happy that you finished that milestone. And that's the exact same feeling I had when we did the IPO. So on the IPO floor and after the IPO, we're also happy that we finally achieved this milestone. But at the same time, we were kind of a little bit worried and scared about the future now that we became.
I think so lots of companies now avoid IPO and go into late IPO, from Airbnb to Uber is a good example of companies that reap billions, tens of billions of dollars of market cap and still don't go IPO. Would you advise them to go IPO?
I would. I mean, so far. So again, we have only been IPO for a few months. So with our limited IPO exposure, absolutely. Like, and frankly, I don't see any difference between being private and IPO in terms of the investor restrictions and discipline that you have to exercise. I mean, again, look at Uber. Despite them being a private company, they still had to have a CEO change, right? Because the investors eventually become much more involved, even if your size is bigger and still private, and they can make changes like that happen. So I don't think it matters if you're private or public.
By the way, you should teach for us. We as you might know, we teach in Egypt. We teach in the Middle East. We make it actually, my priority has been to really bring good education specifically to the Middle East because it's so close to where I grew up. And in some sense, I don't think there's enough of it in places like Egypt.
Yeah.
The big difference with us is when you teach with us, you do it once and you teach for the next 3 or 4 years. And you reach maybe 500,000 students, 1 million students.
Yes. Which we have been doing. I mean, Cloudera has been doing that with you, and maybe me personally at some point I can get back into doing that. Right now I'm very busy with Cloudera itself, making sure the company continues to grow. But yeah, in my long-term kind of prospects, when I'm done with Cloudera, who knows when that will be, is teaching is definitely in my roadmap.
Well, you're most invited to come teach with us in big scale or small scale or tiny scale any point in time. I actually always saw as a great give back to people to do this, because we learn so many things here in Silicon Valley that the rest of the world doesn't know and is eager to know.
Yeah, no, very true.
And we can change careers and so on.
Yeah, change careers and economies and countries.
Before I open up to student questions, I just want to get your perspective on data science. There's so much hype about artificial intelligence now and deep learning, and Elon Musk is telling us we are already enslaved as like chicken because of AI. What's your take? What has changed in the last 15 years since you started doing data science?
First, I don't agree with Elon Musk. We can get back to that, to his kind of...
You agree or disagree?
I don't agree. I disagree.
Okay,
I disagree with him. His kind of nightmare scenarios he's painting, that's all like very far away from even happening right now. We can get back to that. But really what changed over the last 15 years is the abundance of data, right? So all of these very nice machine learning and deep learning algorithms that we are and that you are teaching today, they're not new. They actually existed 40, 50, 60 years ago. The first neural network was built about 70 years ago. What is different though is for these algorithms to work and to work correctly, they need data, and they need lots of data, right? And that's the difference actually between the machines and the humans, is we are able to learn with a lot less data compared to machines. Machines and all these techniques that we have.
Possibly. We spend years babbling and doing
until we reach the nuggets, but then you can pass the nugget to a new kid in school and teach them how to do algebra and calculus like that, right? To teach a neural network how to do calculus, you would need a lot of examples coming in, feeding into that before it can actually do it. And that's kind of one of the key differences between our intellect and the machine intellect, in my opinion, is that our ability to digest and extract and repeat the key learnings with a very small subset of input data. But that's the big change for machine learning, and why machine learning and data science is making a comeback, a very strong comeback, is data, availability of data. And availability of data comes from three key trends that took place. The first one is the IT movement, the information technology movement. Because of a lot of us as organizations and companies and countries moving a lot of our processes to be happening in computers, we are able now to instrument them and collect data about them. So that's number one. And number two is the mobile revolution that allowed us to deploy and measure everywhere. And number three is the sensor network revolution that allowed us to measure everything, not just about humans, but about cars, about trains, about airplanes. So these three trends are what led to the explosion of the amount of data available to us, which was the precursor to data science actually working.
Let me ask a gutsy question. Since you've been with the field for so long and seen it evolve, and of course are one of the intellectual leaders with forming of Cloudera and so on. 15 years from now, what should we be teaching at Udacity? What's going to happen in society when it comes to data?
So that's 15 years is a very long time.
In the rest of the world, it's short.
Just look how much happened in the last 15 years. Facebook, Amazon, Uber, all of these things, Cloudera, Udacity, all of these things happened within the last 15 years. But I would say if the trajectory we're on continues to evolve at the speed it's at, then the most important skill to learn in the future will be the skill to learn. That is the skill that we need to master, meaning having the flexibility and adaptability to learn and acquire new skills. And that's why Udacity is very, very important actually, because that's your mission, is to make it easy for people to learn new skills even when they're 90 years old. And that would be the most important thing. To take a grander look at this whole journey, I frequently describe the wave that we're in right now as the sixth wave of automation.
The sixth wave, okay, why?
The sixth wave of automation. And there is 5 automation waves that happened before to appreciate how lucky we are to be living where we are today. The first wave happened 100,000 years ago. 100,000 years ago, we figured out this, meaning speech. Right? And when we figured out speech, humans figured out how to automate the passing of knowledge from generation to generation way quicker than any other species. And that's what made Homo sapiens really just go like this when gorillas and elephants and dolphins stayed down here. Because we were able now to pass information much quicker using our speech versus depending on DNA for passing knowledge. So that was wave number one. Wave number 2 was 10,000 years ago. So there was 90,000 years between the first wave and the second wave. And the second wave was when we figured out the automation of making food. So before that, we had the hunter-gatherers, as you know, and we had to spend 16 hours per day just looking for food. We had no time to think, no time to learn, no time to innovate. We were just looking for food.
Most animals do today.
Yeah, exactly, which is what most animals do today, exactly. So when we figured out agriculture, when we had these smart farmers who figured out using the ebbs and flows of rivers, and Egypt actually played a big role in that, so I'm proud of Egypt's contribution when it comes to that wave. We figured out planting seeds using cattle, we can grow food at much higher rates. We now freed ourselves to think a lot more. And actually another part that happened there is we figured out cooking. We figured out fire and we can cook food. And cooking food allowed our brain to absorb a lot more energy, which allowed us to evolve much quicker as a species. And another very important thing that happened is we now had enough food to feed our children, so our population really started to explode. That was the second wave. Sorry if I'm going into too much detail.
Fascinating.
It is. The third wave is the wave of discovery, automation of discovery, which is mathematics and science. The principles of math and science and the scientific method and chemistry, biology, and so on. And that happened around 3,000 years ago, give or take, of course. It doesn't happen like overnight. So that was the third wave. The fourth wave is getting much closer to our time now. And the fourth wave is the Industrial Revolution, which happened around 200 years ago, 300 years ago. And that's when we figured out how to use machines to build stuff and move stuff as opposed to use our arms, right? We depended on our arms to make cloth and move things between towns and build buildings. And now we have machines that help us do that at much higher rates. And so many people lost jobs because of that, but nobody would argue that the Industrial Revolution was so good for all of us in the long term. And then wave number 5, we lived. Wave number 5 is the IT movement. And the IT movement is the automation of processes, just a process. How do we take a process of opening a bank account or sending a letter and doing that with WhatsApp and Snapchat instead? Really, that's what it's about. It's very important, but at the end of the day, it's taking an existing process and repeating that process in a much quicker way. The 6th wave, the wave that we're in right now, the data science wave, I refer to it as the automation of decisions. And hence will come out my answer to your question. The automation of decisions is about how can we take all of this data that's coming to us from better sensors and mobile networks and better machines, and then analyze that data so we can take and automate some of the decisions that the humans make. This is really what it is about. So we can analyze how we drive a car and automate the driving of cars, which I understand is one of the programs you guys offer. Is
I've spent a day or two on this,
yes.
self-driving cars in my life.
And then another example from our customers is JP Morgan. JP Morgan was able to take decades of legal documents that their lawyers had to review for partnerships they're doing with different partners. And now, using machine learning, they were able to replace 400,000 lawyer hours with 10 minutes of computer time, making decisions about the legal language in these documents.
You're not scared that you take all the brain work away and you're all unemployed afterwards?
That's exactly why.
What if your own company builds the digital CTO and finds out that they're much better? That 1,000 hours of your time is like 20 seconds of their computer.
Yes, it's very possible, and that's why my answer to your question was, what we need to do, humans, what we need to do is to evolve ourselves to be able to learn new skills at much higher rates than ever before. Because there will be no comfort zone. There will be no zone of, I'm really good at that, I'm only going to be a CTO for the rest of my life. No. At some point, that will be replaced and you will need to be good at something else. So that's why the most important skill of the future is what Udacity is working on, which is teaching people how to learn continuously, all the time.
Thanks. I mean, I couldn't agree more with everything you said.
I'm sure you will.
I need to ask the gutsy question. What's wave number 7?
So wave number 7, it's very hard to predict what exactly it would be, but my prediction, from my knowledge, would be the augmentation of humans with technology, which has
seamless integration of computer and human thinking.
And not just for the thinking, for everything, right? So you can look at the glasses. I used to wear glasses when I was young, but I did the laser surgery. Glasses were the first kind of augmentation of technology coming into us and making us better. Somebody who cannot see, put this thing on and they can see now. We will have things like that will help us with our health, that will help us with our thinking, that will help us with our hearing, with our speaking, with everything around us. And that would be the 7th wave.
That's amazing. I would actually argue this is already ongoing. I mean, I have this little device here, and using this, I can talk to a person in Australia, which before I couldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have a car, I can fly a plane.
Yeah.
But yeah, right. I think I actually envision that there can be seamless integration in our brains, where we have a chip in our brain that
Absolutely.
has massive data throughput to computer centers. So the moment we are born, we can speak every language or something like this.
Yeah, I can't wait for that to happen.
Yeah. Me too.
That is the 7 ways.
True. Thank you. I need to go to a student question. I want to ask you one question before I do this. Specifically because, I mean, we both grew up in countries far away, but culturally, I think your country is even further away. It's very Islamic. It's part of the Middle East. It's at times in deep trouble. It's economically not one of the most rosy countries and hasn't been in your childhood. When you talk to young people from the Middle East today and Egypt, what do you recommend to them? And if they ask you, how can I follow your footsteps and become a great entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, what would you tell them?
So how to become an entrepreneur, not just in Silicon Valley, I mean, not just would be relevant to somebody from Egypt. I think this would be relevant to somebody from any place in the world. It's a very hard question to answer. There's so many things that go into making an entrepreneur become an entrepreneur. But I would say that one of the very key elements that many would agree on that entrepreneurs exhibit is the willingness to take risk, the willingness to try things in new ways and fail while trying these things, but learn from the failure very quickly and adapt, right? And that's why immigrants like myself and yourself tend to have a higher ratio of being entrepreneurs. A very recent study showed that 51% of the current Silicon Valley unicorns, meaning companies that crossed $1 billion in valuation, had at least one founder that is an immigrant. Yeah, wow. 51%.
Like Sergey Brin, yourself.
Yeah. I mean, so many examples of that. And the reason why is that more than anything else is like an immigrant was willing to take the biggest risk of all, which is leaving everything behind, leaving their country, their friends, their family, and starting anew somewhere else. So they have this natural willingness to just try new things, and that makes them a very good fit to be. Is it something you can teach, or is it something that's just innate? I think it's innate. I think it's innate. I think risk taking is very, very innate. And it's one of the key things that I think investors look for is are you pretending to be a risk taker or are you truly a risk taker? That's a sad answer, because I wish we could teach it, because I mean, I agree with you, risk is the source. And in fact, I would argue the willingness to learn is already a risk-taking position, because learning means you do something you don't know, you're not good at. Yeah. And you're willing to fail in that and learn something interesting. So I think it's innate, but I think it's sometimes innate and hidden, and it needs to be uncovered. Like in my case, it was innate, and I could be just now being too arrogant, but in my case it was innate, and it was hidden. Mm-hmm. When I was young, I was not thinking about being an entrepreneur whatsoever. What kept you from not thinking this way? Why did you want to save professor career? The environment in Egypt is very rare that you would see a company, a startup. All of these things were very remote, so not possible. Mm-hmm. Like somebody to start a company from fresh, and it's not something we couldn't even think about. And when I came here in the US, especially to the Bay Area, when I landed in the airport, I passed by Oracle, I passed by Intel, I passed by HP, and the first garage where HP actually started, I could go visit the garage and see this is where HP actually was formed. And that triggers into you the notion that this is doable, that people were doing these things. And hence it kind of switched me in that way. But I think, there's many human skills or talents that you cannot teach. Like, I'm not a good singer. Are you a good singer? Can you sing? My shower thinks I'm a good singer. So do you think we can teach you to be a good singer? It's very hard. Maybe it's doable, but it's very hard. I think singing can be taught, honestly. Not at the same level to everybody, but I think it can be taught. Mm-hmm. I took singing lessons when I was younger. I have so many more questions. This is amazing. But I want to give some voice to our students, because it's a habit in our Udacity talks that we let our students ask questions. They have much better questions than me often. Some are industry focused. So Omar, sounds like a Middle Eastern name, asks, how will machine learning and artificial intelligence shape data analysis? Yeah, so I kind of answered that a little bit with the sixth wave talk that I gave. But if you look at data analysis historically, like data analysis during the IT wave was very focused on generating a report. Mm-hmm. So we do the analysis and we generate a report, and then that report a human like myself or you would look at and make a decision. Mm-hmm. Right? So we'd look at the numbers and say, our student engagement is dropping. We must have done something wrong. Let's go back and see what did we do and what led to the student engagement dropping. So the analysis was very passive in that way, meaning the analysis was simply about generating something and then the human had to take the action. And the big shift right now with data science and machine learning, what is introducing this next mile of no, that data will not feed into a report, that data will feed into a decision that will be taken.
Yeah.
That data will feed into a legal document that will be generated automatically, will feed into a car that will be self-driven, will lead into a diagnostic system that will tell you exactly what disease you have and what medicine to take, without the doctor needing to be involved at all. And that's the big shift.
Interesting. I mean, obviously I'm an optimist just like you, but it does have this little kind of strange issue, like what if the machine makes a bad decision and I don't get my cancer removed.
Yeah, so here's the good thing. I hear that criticism all the time, but
so
here's
do
the
I,
good
by the
thing. Here's the good thing. Humans make bad decisions all the time. Machines will make bad decisions, but here's the beauty of machines. Once they make the bad decision and we correct for it, they will never make that bad decision again, ever. And that's the difference.
That's great. Chad asked a question, is it possible for big data analytics to advance substantially without further compromising user privacy?
Oh, yes.
I'm sure you've heard that question before.
Yeah, very controversial question that I hear about.
And there's
all
no
the time.
camera here.
So I think it's always about the balance, right? It's always about the balance and the exchange of value. You're giving up your privacy in exchange for something. And if you don't get that something back, then don't give up your privacy. So when I go to use, for example, Udacity, and let's assume Udacity is monitoring how I'm taking the class, which is my privacy, how quickly I'm learning, which is my privacy, how quickly and correctly I'm answering or not answering questions, which is my privacy. But then it's using that data to change the flow of the course, to give me harder or easier content, to make it quicker for me to absorb the material, then I would take that. There is a good exchange of value. I'm giving away my privacy, which is all the data about how I'm interacting with material, but in exchange, you're giving me value, which changing the flow of the material so I can learn quicker and better. And as long as we maintain that formula of the exchange of the privacy in exchange for value back to you, then it makes perfect sense. If we ever violate that trust, that's when things become bad. And that's where the governments need to step in and have the laws and regulations that prevent companies from abusing data in a way that doesn't create that balance between the privacy being given up and the value coming back.
So from that end, you probably argue that something like the NSA collecting data is not the bad thing. It's if they were to abuse it against us, that's the bad thing.
So that one is controversial, and the reason why that one is controversial is I'm not getting the value immediately. So when they're collecting data about me, it's not about giving me value, it's about trying to detect if somebody is doing something bad and stopping them from doing the bad thing that they were going to do. And that's where you need to have the balance of, okay, I'm willing, that makes sense, I want you to stop the bad guy from doing that, but I have to balance how much value, how much data you're taking away from me that you should not. And that's kind of where it becomes very tricky. Is to define the threshold.
It's a very tricky question.
Yeah.
Raji asked a question, what tools and statistical skills should a student have to become a data scientist?
Very good question. I would say take your courses here, the 9 degrees that you offer in data science and machine learning and the self-driving cars and so on. But really, a good data scientist sit at the intersection of 3 disciplines. The first one is business acumen, meaning, and that's not something you learn in school, that's something you learn by doing, which is the ability to link technical concepts and algorithms with business concepts and motivations and goals. Number 2, and maybe you can create some material around that, but it's very hard to teach that. Usually you want to experience that. The second discipline is the discipline of statistics and the algorithms behind machine learning and so on. That's the science behind machine learning. And then the third discipline is programming. And the programming language of the future for data science, as far as I'm concerned, is Python. So having a very, very good solid grasp of Python is essential to succeed as a data scientist.
Which we teach here. It's interesting. It's actually interesting how fast this shifts, because a short time ago we would have said MATLAB or R.
No, I mean, MATLAB had a very long run and continues to be one of the best scientific places, languages to use for scientific discovery and simulations and so on. But if you look at data science, really at the beginning of data science, it started with R and SAS, and now there is a very, very big shift towards Python.
Yeah,
very
I
big
agree. I agree, and
yeah.
I love Python, to be honest. Mustafa asked a question. It's more career focused. Silicon Valley is seen as an innovation hub, so is of course your company, what you've contributed. How can Egypt, I'm sure you've heard this question before, how can Egypt and similar other countries in the Middle East replicate or even advance beyond this kind of sort of innovative startup culture?
Yeah, so we discussed that briefly in previous questions. It's not just the Egypt thing, the entire world. I mean, Europe and Asia and South America.
China has managed to get ahead. I mean, 4 of the 10 largest tech companies are Chinese.
Yes, so China is definitely very, very impressive.
None in India.
And all in the last.
None in Africa.
There's some examples, but yeah, you're right. China definitely is very impressive when it comes to that. And I think it goes back to the risk-taking behavior, that they're willing to take risks. But the reason Silicon Valley became Silicon Valley is the combination of 3 things, in my opinion. The first one is entrepreneurs, people willing to take risk, people willing to leave a very big job with a very big salary at Microsoft or IBM and say, I'm going to start a company. So that was number one. Back then when HP started, I don't know what the GE or GM, one of the big companies back then. So that's number one, is willing to leave a big comfortable salary to start something new, which is the risk-taking behavior. So that's number one. Number two.
The HP, by the way, founders gave up tenure at Stanford.
Wow, which is even like, that's a huge risk to take, because once you give that up, it's very hard to get it back. Actually, just getting tenure is very hard. Number two is risk, but risk on the other side, on the money side. So having investors willing to put money behind a startup, which is very hard. Most investors, like, I think it's one of the biggest problems in Egypt and Middle East, is most of them still think like investment banking. But VC is very different from investment banking. VC, for every investment for every 10 investments you're gonna make, you'll be lucky if one of them did very well. And sometimes even it's now 1 in 1,000 will do very, very well and become a public company with a very high valuation. And that's something very hard for them to get their minds around. They're used more to businesses which are a spreadsheet. You have the spreadsheet, you can see the growth, you can see how much they're spending on their employees, and this is how much more we can invest in them to make this much more money. Much more deterministic, much more lower returns, obviously, because of that. But that's the second thing. And then the third important thing is the availability of talent. So one of the benefits here of the Bay Area is they have 2 very major hubs, Stanford University and the Berkeley system, the UC system, producing tons and tons of talent feeding into the system. And that all of these things existed at the beginning 70 years ago when HP, one of the very first startups, was forming. So that's what's needed to replicate. And the harder of these 3 is the first 2.
Alex asks the question, what would you tell yourself as your 20-year-old self now?
What would I tell my 20 years? So my 20-year-old self, that was the person that just came to the US back in 1995. I would have told him to buy a lot of Apple stock. That's what I've told him. I'd be richer even than me with the Cloudera.
I would buy Bitcoin. I
would buy exist
Bitcoin. Even
then.
5 years ago, buy Bitcoin.
Yeah. I agree with that too, but it didn't exist back then. 1995, Apple existed, and Apple was a penny stock. Can you believe that? Amazing.
I guess, which penny stock would you buy today?
If I knew that answer, we would be sitting here.
I think I love the idea of having a profit in your family. Alex, maybe the same or maybe different Alex asking a question. I'm going to slightly change it, but he asked the question, what fields in tech do you believe are going to grow fast in the next 10 years? But even today, what do you think are the fast-growing things that are coming at us right now?
Yeah, so I mean, first I'm very biased. So I think our field, meaning the machine learning, the science field, is definitely going to be a field.
I think there's absolutely no content.
Yeah, so that again, thank you for affirming that. But, another field which I think will evolve very quickly is what we referred to earlier, which is the augmentation. Virtual reality, augmented reality, devices that go in our body and help us do things with much higher efficiency than we can with our normal body today. I think that's going to be a very
augmentation is such a wide field. I mean, my airplane augments my ability to move around. My cell phone augments my ability to talk to somebody else or access maybe, I don't know, stock tickers.
Yeah. So some things we would need, like you mentioned the languages thing. So if I have a device I can put in my ear or even my brain later on that helps me understand any language. So I travel a lot across the world right now, and it's a big challenge when you travel to a country where you have no idea what people are saying.
So you need Google Glass plus.
Google Glass plus with something in my ear as well. So I don't know who does a good ear device as well that can do real-time translation and also real-time text mapping. When I look at a sign like this, automatically.
You know that Google Translate does this on the phone, but you say you want to read it in the ear. That makes perfect sense to me. What else? Like, what cool stuff should we be working on, or do you see people working on? I'm really curious. Because you're CTO, you're a technology officer. I'm just the president.
I mean, we continue to, there's no question about the cloud wave being a very significant wave. We're still at the beginning of it, despite all the success that AWS and Amazon has. We're still at the beginning of the cloud wave. Most large enterprises in the world right now, all of their processing is happening inside of their own data centers.
Yeah, I know.
And we only are experiencing the beginning of that. Yeah. So that is another big wave that's going to
happen. I have a theory why this is moving slower than it should be. It's because most big corporations have like 1,000 or 5,000 IT professionals. And when the corporations ask the question, should we go to the cloud? They get together and realize, oh my God, shit, I'm going to lose my job here. They say yes. So you're going to find every reason in the world to say no.
Yeah, so we need your help there. We need you to have more and more courses that can help these people be adaptive. As I said, that the most important skill in the future is to be adaptive and learn new skills.
I agree. Are you planning any more education with Udacity as a company?
From Cloudera's side? Yeah, I would love to do that, yes.
I can tell you, I mean, you were perhaps our earliest or one of the 2 or 3 earliest partners, and it was such a eye-opening thing to be able to get something done by a company as opposed to academia. And I'm a recovering academic. I'm a bit like the road that you wanted to go and then eventually decided to give up tenure. But getting a company like Cloudera to tell us what really is hot right now was so much more interesting than having any kind of number of professors talk to that kind of thought is know what's going on. So
I think both are important, but yes, the balance is very important.
Well, I think we are mostly out of town. Is there anything you want to add to our students in the world? Any place of wisdom?
So I think, like one key piece of advice I would give, and I think this applies to anything, not just being an entrepreneur, is perseverance. Is have a sense of perseverance. Whatever you're working on, whatever you're dedicated to, just don't give up easy.
Do you think perseverance can be taught?
It can be nurtured.
Can be nurtured, I see. So
yes. If you have not been, meaning it can be taught from early on. If you have not been taught from early on to have a sense of perseverance, it's very hard to get it back into you.
Yeah, I bet that's the case.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating talking to you. And
same thing, yeah.
Boy, I could say from all the 11 Udacity talks, it's probably the one I agreed with the most, to be honest. But I found it really, your 6 stages of society found super enlightening. I guess you left out the agricultural revolution, which you probably folded into the industrial revolution.
No, I did mention agriculture.
Okay.
Yeah. The second wave. Second wave is agriculture.
No, but the more recent one, the agricultural revolution that happened with steam engine and so on.
Okay.
And farming. But I guess it's very similar to industrial.
Yeah, that would overlap with the industry. Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming. It's fascinating. I would love to spend many more hours with you. And thanks for being such a great partner to our students in the world. I have to admit, I find it inspiring, especially meeting someone who's made it through the world the way you, Amr, have, and has stayed humble and open-minded. There's so much for us to learn, for all of us, to be honest, in what can be done. And I mean, we have Udacity as one piece of token contribution to help everyone to learn new skills. I'd love to learn or teach skills that go way beyond it, the things that you call innate, that I actually believe can be taught, like risk-taking. Maybe we should have a risk-taking class at some point, and if you would submit the risks they took this day. But yeah, I mean, I think if I think of Egypt, I've traveled in Egypt many years ago, and I loved the energy of the country, I loved the innovation and freshness that I could see. At the same time, you're right, the infrastructure to turn this energy into something massive entrepreneurial is missing, and I think will be missing, unfortunately, for quite a while for these countries. Yeah. But boy, I'm inspired. I'm inspired meeting you. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely, my pleasure.